ahead and call it to order. If you would bow your heads for the invocation. Father, we thank you so much for this beautiful day. Lord, we just ask that you be with us as we listen to the presentation tonight and as we handle the business of the planning board. And Lord, we just thank you for this opportunity to serve our community. We ask that you go with us, lead us, and guide us. In thy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Let's stand for our pledge.
Sure. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first agenda item is to approve the minutes of our November meeting. Those are before you. I'll entertain a motion on that.
Make a motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise. We have 3 of our board members that their terms have expired or about to expire. I'll take a motion on what you would like to do for the 3 board members, Hope, Jonathan, and Sky.
I got a question.
Yes.
Do all of them want to read that, to go back in? Do you want to go back in, Sky? Sky says yes. Jonathan?
I mean, for sure, I'm here for the community at large, and if you are happy working with me, I'm happy to work with you all.
Oh,
Y'all want me to start? I'll continue.
okay. I just didn't want to put anybody on the spot.
Thank you for asking. Good.
All right, do I have a recommendation?
If they want to do it, let's go for it. So I motion.
Okay, we have a recommendation to reappoint the 3 members.
A second.
Got a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise. We thank you all for agreeing.
And ask.
So that will go to the board at their March meeting. Okay. All right, I'm gonna turn it over to Sean. You can get us going on our presentation tonight.
All right. So tonight, if you'll scroll down just a little bit. Tonight, as you can see, we've got Miss Amanda Hollingsworth with WithersRavenel. She's our project manager on our stormwater plan that we've been working on. There's a couple of aspects to the stormwater plan. If you recall, at the end of November, we discussed, I gave a brief presentation on the stormwater ordinance section of the plan. There's also in the plan a couple of other topics. One, of course, being some projects that the town could look to seek funding on that would have the effect of making a creation in the community. I think both projects were actually economic based projects with stormwater tie-ins. So Amanda will talk a little bit about that here in just a couple of minutes, but I asked her to come tonight so that she could, or to virtually attend tonight, and you'll see her in just a second. We'll switch screens and use the power of modern technology here to our advantage. But I asked her to come tonight to do 2 things: to give the board a brief overview of the plan, what was in the plan, and then also to give the board an opportunity to ask questions to Ms. Hollingsworth. We, the town staff, feel that it's very important the planning board's involved in the stormwater draft and the stormwater ultimate plan, because all the implications that happen in the zoning code and during planning that tie back into stormwater. So having said that, we'll switch over to the Teams call or the Zoom call, and I'll let Ms. Hollingsworth take it away.
All right, perfect. Good night, everyone.
And so I am able to share my video, but I don't know exactly where that would be showing up. And so I don't want to share, if it, not be helpful. And then I also can pull up some slides on my end as well, but just want to make sure that if I did anything on my end that you would be able to see it. So, Sean, I don't know if that would work best, or I can just talk and then answer questions as well.
I think I just gave you the co-host, so if you want to share some items, you're on our
Okay.
screen here, so they can see what you're sharing.
Okay, perfect. That will work then. Let me make sure that's pulled up. All right. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
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 Okay. And so with this, like Sean mentioned, really, I'm just going to kind of start and give a really brief overview of kind of the overall plan, what it entailed. And then just kind of at the end, focus on any questions or policy consideration type topics. But through this was funded through the Golden Leaf program. Sorry, I'm trying to move my slides here. And really the grant is focused on flood mitigation. And so in December 2022, the town was awarded $82,500 to develop a stormwater management plan for the town. And really with the Golden Leaf money, what they really want to do is focus on addressing localized flooding that towns and municipalities are experiencing during heavy storm events. As part of the application, it was really kind of focused on the sort of northeast section of town. I know that's kind of where they had the documented flooding, that they could justify the grant. And that's where a lot of the stormwater runoff is kind of moving from that, upper right, that northeast, and kind of moving southwest across the lake. And so with that, this is really supposed to be kind of be flood mitigation focused, but with the application, I know that part of that was kind of allowing for water quality considerations just because of the unique characteristics of the town and knowing that that is also a priority. And so again, just trying to maintain that focus and that like the big picture, it really was a flood mitigation type study. But the grant did allow for the specific municipality to be able to kind of explore and expand that a little bit to kind of look past just basic flood mitigation. And so within that, really, there was a few main pieces where the first was a document review and research where some peer communities were selected to kind of see what they were doing. So looking at other lakes, like see what their lake management programs were like. And again, this was kind of that expanding past just basic traditional flood mitigation and kind of giving that opportunity to see what peer communities are doing who kind of face maybe similar challenges and have similar physical constraints, having a lot of people around the lake and things like that. So that was kind of one thing. And then the rest of these here are kind of focused on more that traditional flood mitigation standpoint, where the first step was we got some survey crews out there within the project area, had them go and pick up storm infrastructure. So where they had pipes or inlets in the curb to try to get data on that and figure out what the town even had. So that way the town knows how to kind of what they even have, what they have within their system, where water's going, really just kind of giving that base of an asset understanding as far as the stormwater infrastructure is. From that, we kind of moved into a watershed analysis. So that was kind of looking at existing conditions. And again, a lot of this is really focused within town boundaries and focus on surface runoff. And, basically anything that's raining, it's falling on the ground. And then all of that stuff that's not soaking into the ground, that's running off and getting into yards or the street or causing the issues, like that was really the focus of this. I know that there's a lot of other kind of concurrent efforts going on about studying the lake and the lake chemistry, and there's other types of groundwater studies and things like that, but this was really focused on kind of just traditional surface flooding, the things that you kind of see during those heavy rain events that prevent people from using the streets that could potentially cause structural damage. And after that, existing conditions kind of focus on developing concepts that could address that, and then summarizing that in a final report. So with that, this is just kind of a quick summary on what was gathered in the inventory data collection phase. So again, focusing on things within the right of way that was easily accessible. I know there's a lot of private property along the lake too. And so just kind of focusing on things that were easily accessible, kind of within the budget as well. And 85 structures were picked up, and you can kind of see that in the image here, where anything that was sort of that blue square was like a structure that was surveyed, and anything that was that kind of orange line that you may see popping out is where they found some type of pipe as well. So again, this is really just trying to provide the town a little bit more information. And so that way, if there is an issue there, you kind of already know what is there. It helps with the maintenance. It helps with kind of understanding the system. It was just that base data gathering. So again, it wasn't the whole town. It wasn't, any of the outlets or outfalls into the lake. And so it was just kind of focusing on the streets and picking up sort of that street drainage within the project area that could have an impact on the surface flooding within that study area of that northern eastern section. Through that, again, it was just that existing conditions analysis. So we kind of looked at the topography, kind of seeing where water was draining. So that's sort of that colorful image where you just kind of see those different elevations showing up in different colors. And that kind of helps us determine where water is going when it falls at a certain location. And that's what is sort of on that right-hand side, where you can kind of see that we have within the project area a little bit of a break where kind of at some point on the far eastern side, it starts to kind of flow away from the lake. And then we have quite a bit kind of flowing east to west through town and through the lake, kind of towards that outlet channel there. So just really did a lot of data gathering, analysis, looked at the soils, looked at rainfall depths, and got a lot of the information to see kind of what was maybe causing the issues, where some of the existing problems were, and kind of use that anecdotal data, the evidence that you guys see day to day, photos, to kind of validate some of that. And when we were thinking of concepts, sort of if it was just traditional flood mitigation, like if you're thinking that if you have a stream crossing and your roadway is flooding during large storms, something you think of as like, all right, let's just make the pipe bigger, make that infrastructure bigger to contain more of that water and just keep it moving, which is great. But something too, we wanted to make sure, especially looking here, was that concepts also could add not just flood mitigation benefits, but focus potentially on having some type of water quality benefit as well. Just, certain things with the water quality in the lake, we don't want to do anything that would have an adverse effect to make it worse. And so if we can kind of get that bang for our buck, do something that can help with flood mitigation while trying to kind of store water, treat water, kind of get rid of any nutrients, anything like that's picking up on pavement or impervious surface, and kind of let it soak, let it fall out. Really just trying to kind of partner that with here. And then also tried to think of things that could potentially be feasible, especially with the water quality. Like anytime you're trying to store water, if you're trying to treat water with some type of green infrastructure, that requires space. And so trying to think of things that could fit maybe within the more spatial constraints that you guys have, knowing that there is quite a bit of, existing development around the lake. There isn't a lot of just empty town-owned parcels anywhere. Even the right-of-way, you have a lot of NCDOT right-of-way too. And so trying to think of things that we can have flood mitigation, provide some water quality benefits, and then also try to take advantage of certain things as far as space or kind of pairing it with something else to make it monetarily more beneficial. Anything like that to try to find something that could be a good solution. And with that, what we really try to do is one, kind of in that northeast section, kind of took the approach that really, as far as just thinking along the roadway, there's not much space there. It's pretty flat just to kind of convert a roadside ditch, an NCDOT ditch or something like that, and really want to try to take advantage of potentially getting enough space. And so with that, the solution was really trying to focus on showing that there is benefit to adding stormwater quality, stormwater treatment, kind of that green infrastructure to other type of economic development activities that could be going on. And first is a stormwater park, and the other option was a recreational facility. And so kind of dig into that in a second. And then the other was trying to look at the recent kind of future streetscape master plan that was completed in the commercial area. And I know they had identified opportunity areas that part of it could have been like green infrastructure to treat stormwater. I know there was a couple other options that you could use in some of those opportunity areas, but looking at that plan and seeing, you know, knowing where that existing stormwater infrastructure is now that we have that inventory, are there good areas within those opportunity areas that would make sense to look at using a stormwater control measure? So not just adding a curb and a gutter and kind of that traditional sense, but trying to, you know, treat it before it gets into the system as well. And again, looking at ways with kind of the spatial constraints to partner things up together. And the last thing too that Sean had asked us to look at was just continuing that peer investigation and looking at policy considerations as well. And so I don't want to get too into the details in all of these, and I can always circle back during questions, but you know, as far as concept one with the stormwater park, this was an example that my group at Withers had designed for the town of Morrisville, where it's a stormwater wetland. It's actually supposed to be designed to look like an M. You can kind of see that in like the upper right-hand corner, but it was supposed to, it's basically a huge wetland where you're kind of storing water, you're treating water, but you have that kind of recreational benefit to it. And with this kind of recommendation, we showed that, you know, if we potentially found or purchased an empty parcel kind of in that northern, northeastern area of town, there's the opportunity where, you know, we could use that, we could convert that and work to divert some of that existing just runoff to the ponds and get treatment where we're not only, when we look at that kind of pre versus post results, when we're looking at peak flows, what we're seeing is that, you know, if we have a 10-year storm event, so an event that has, you know, like a 1 out of 10 chance of happening every single year, that if we had kind of existing, we'd have a certain peak flow that is flowing in cubic feet per second. But if we, you know, created a wetland, we created a pond that's holding and storing water, we can reduce that peak flow. So we get that storage, we're trying to store water. And another thing with the wetlands is that we can then work to treat different nitrogen and phosphorus and nutrients. And with that, you can see that when doing the design event, we can kind of oversize things to reduce these nutrients that are in the surface runoff. So trying to, you know, none of this is going to be cheap. And I think with that, trying to know that if you're already going to invest a lot of money, if we're going to have to purchase space to build things that are storing water and treating water, we might as well kind of partner that with other things that are beneficial to citizens and, you know, have kind of those ecosystem benefits that kind of make it a little bit easier to partner that money with, and can have a little bit of a story to tell when we're looking at grants. And that's kind of the same thing too with that kind of, oh, if we had purchased a theoretical empty parcel, or if someone was kind of developing a recreation center, you know, spending that extra money to do permeable turf. We have a couple examples here, you know, from the town of Apex and town of Holly Springs. And that bottom example from the town of Holly Springs, you can see on the kind of right-hand side, there's like a sneaky little wet pond in there that by kind of storing your water and treating your water, we're getting both reduction in peak flow. So reducing the amount of water that's kind of then leaving on the get to the streets. And we're also treating it as well. And so trying to partner this with other things to kind of make it a little bit more palatable. And it's things that, you know, as you walk by, you don't necessarily know that your soccer field is adding to that benefit. It's, you know, kind of sneaky, it's kind of in there. And it can just basically help things overall, by adding these additional, green infrastructure areas. And with that can also address that overarching flood mitigation goal through the grant. And the other area, as we talked about, was that kind of trying to pair it with that streetscape and the commercial area by kind of using those opportunity areas to create sort of these treatment sections before it kind of goes into the storm system. And so there's this example here from Indianapolis, which we did not do the design. We just kind of use this as a good graphic example, but you can kind of see that next, you know, it provides that safety buffer between pedestrians and cars, but the stormwater from the street can kind of enter this green infrastructure area. It can soak into the soil, and before it kind of goes back into a pipe that might be discharging to the lake. And, you know, with this, with anything here, you know, from that existing street cross section, we don't really have a ton of space to, you know, add this right now. But if the town was moving forward with kind of that full streetscape, and you're doing the roadway improvements and you're going through the whole process, like that's a good time to partner this in, use that opportunity to kind of have that new dedicated space to do this, especially as you're already looking at the street cross section, with kind of how that's mixed in with pedestrian or bike and that as well. And so I think overall, as far as like the physical kind of infrastructure concepts, that's really where we landed in that. Knowing that it's a really developed town, the town doesn't necessarily have a ton of land that it owns itself. You know, for anything where we're trying to store and treat, that just kind of requires space, and having space and creating wetlands and things like that is going to cost money. So trying to come up with ideas that can, you know, add additional benefit, or in this example with the streetscape, trying to take advantage that, you know, maybe there's already other work going on, and we might as well just kind of use this as an opportunity as the other work's going on to add in these benefits that can help, both with the water quantity and then the water quality. So we have some cost estimates. You know, I think with all of them, again, they are very rough, especially like when you're talking about some of those concepts where we are looking at the stormwater park or the recreation park. Obviously, they were very conceptual. You know, it's not like we have a site plan right now. We don't have the parcel. We don't have, for example, recreation center. We don't know how many soccer fields there'll be. And so these are very rough, and we really try to kind of focus on, hey, assuming, you know, in the report, we kind of wrote in our assumptions as far as which drainage area was treating, how big each of the wetlands were, but tried to kind of just show that it's gonna be expensive to get these stormwater pieces in, but especially if you're looking at additional grant money, we kind of have those ecosystem benefits, which is really kind of a key parameter right now. And two, knowing that we're kind of partnering it with these other aspects, that, you know, there's other ways as well, that we're not just limiting ourselves to like some very specific stormwater funding opportunities, that there's other things, especially if you're saying it's a recreation center, or if it's a park, we kind of are trying to expand to widen that and give a little bit more opportunity there. And again, even with the streetscape, I think we're looking at, maybe $1 million to kind of add that in, but again, it's a little bit difficult when, even when you're thinking of the construction, like, well, all of that, if you're doing a whole streetscape, all the construction costs are going to run together, the design costs are going to run together. You get that cost efficiency when someone's already out there doing something, and you can just kind of add this in. It's kind of already included in the design costs. Maybe we have a little bit more material costs, but overall, the goal is that this is just a snippet of these, and they're so conceptual because we don't have the exact parcel, or we don't have a full street design yet to actually know what it would be, but it really kind of helps get us in a good spot to kind of move forward with at least a ballpark of what we could be chasing. And after that, really, as far as the policy considerations go, the peer communities we selected are here, where the first 3 were kind of like the lake specific communities, just to see how they were managing their lakes and if they had any specific programs. And then the last 3 on the list here, starting with the town of Jacksonville, was more brought up when Sean had mentioned that he would also like to kind of look at ordinances as part of that peer community review. And with that, I know that Sean has kind of already given that presentation on the ordinance aspect, but I think the big thing here is that one size does not fit all with all of these, and we have a couple different examples and different charts in the report, and I can pull something up here in a second. But with that, it's kind of the mix of finding something that works for you. I think there's still a lot of education aspects in it. I think there's still a lot of things that we can recommend, and we can dig into that in a second. But I think just really the kind of the starting point in our tables there are just, the goal with this is just not to say that you have to do one thing or another. It was really try to summarize different things that they're doing, in case it's something that, maybe you think the town of Jacksonville, maybe it's the way that they approach it just isn't a great fit, but you kind of like the theory that they have buffers, and that's kind of how maybe they regulate what happens where in an ordinance. Just because maybe they had a 50-foot buffer and it doesn't work for you, it kind of just starts kind of getting that language out and can get the conversation going about the different approaches and how they manage things versus having to kind of follow that specific thing. Because, on our side too, one of the staff members that had been working with me closely on this had spent quite a bit of time. She had worked for the town of Chapel Hill as, in their stormwater department, working for the municipality. So I know she was really kind of managing one of these stormwater programs, and I think we're just really wanting to support and answer questions and show kind of what other places do, while understanding that, any type of additional regulation or things like that just can become a additional thing that you need to make sure that is being enforced. And it just adds, more to if you have to hire someone to, for example, if someone needed to have a full-time person who is inspecting stormwater control measures on new developments, that's still town resources and budgets that have to go to kind of enforcing anything. And so wanting to make sure we weren't kind of coming out and saying you have to do everything that Jacksonville is doing, but just trying to provide some options and approaches to kind of help you guys kind of start thinking about what might be a good fit based on the things you're seeing in town moving forward. As far as next steps, really just helping you guys review recommendations. I think really there are opportunities for funding and implementation. And like I said, specifically, some of those, both on the streetscape side, but even something like a stormwater park that is, getting has a lot of open space and things like that, that has kind of ecosystem benefits, kind of tends to score well, in addition to the fact that you know, you can be improving flood mitigation, just that type of thing that can kind of hit a couple different buckets there. And then kind of, you know, moving forward design and construction. And I think with any of these concepts, you know, none of these are shovel ready. You know, we are kind of in this planning stage, seeing what might be a good fit, what might work well, kind of based on the design constraints that we're seeing. But I think that there's opportunities, especially moving forward, to keep this in mind so that as opportunities arise through funding or other opportunities, you know, if something comes up on the streetscape side, to keep it in mind and use that as a guide. So that way you have something in writing that you can go back to if you needed to get funding to say that, hey, we did have this plan. It's not coming out of nowhere. This is why we're asking for funding, and we can move forward with that. So I know I've been going on, and that's kind of the overall with that. And I think I'm kind of ready. If you guys have any questions or if you want to talk anything specific, I'm happy to do that.
I always hate being the person to talk, but I guess this Hollingsworth, thank you for your presentation and stuff, and for you know, going over the Golden Leaf stormwater management plan that we received in November. On that plan, you know, I guess it's got the I guess the project area. You kept talking about the northeastern side of the lake, and I guess our goal is for flood mitigation and stuff. One of the things that I didn't see in the plan was on the southern side of the lake, I guess. And when I talk about that, I just mean to say that when I think of floodwaters and stormwater management, or stormwater flood mitigation, being a local, Maple Avenue is one of the biggest problem areas around our lake on Highway 53 and Maple Avenue, which is adjacent to Nathan's Cove and the what we call the condos. That area floods all the time. And you know, that wasn't a part of y'all's plan or any information about that. And then another place that floods a lot is actually on our multi-use path, the parking lot area there in front of Waterford Estates. We've got a lot of flooding that gets really close to the highway and parking areas there. We also have flooding on the Highway 53 just south of and across from Camp Clearwater, where there's a bay on the other side of 53 that kind of drains towards the highway 53. Anyway, so just to say, you know, y'all have done a great job, but I feel like we're missing some stuff on the southeastern side of the lake, or the I'm sorry, western side of the lake. Sorry, not southeastern, southwestern side of the lake. And then on the inflows, you know, on your inflows map where the red arrows are coming in, it does kind of show the areas pointing towards the lake and then away from the lake. And again, on the south western side of the lake, we've got no arrows, you know, to kind of say that there are bays and things like that that we need to address as far as our flood mitigation. The other comment that I had written down was if we're going to have a on the, I guess on the plans for your I guess plan 2 or plan 3 or the structures, what are they called? Yeah, on the concepts for the streetscapes concepts and all, and those ditches, or not ditches, but yeah, that stuff right there. So on that, one of the areas of concerns that I have, if you look at in the middle picture there, where Golston's Beach, now Grand Regal, you know, we've got these flood areas where we're draining the parking lot, and then it comes across you know, County Road 1515 White Lake Drive. I don't really see where does that water go? I guess what I'm thinking is for the water quality of White Lake and for the hydrology of the recharge of White Lake, you know, we want to, like you say, the point of these retaining ponds and stuff like that is to capture the stormwater but then capture it so that it's not flowing aggressively to a way to cause erosion and things like that. But we want to sequester it and then let it seep back into our watershed. And on your map, one of them, you kind of have like this dividing line of the fall line that kind of says, hey, the water flows this way when it's in this direction. And then once you get to this part, it goes the opposite way. So I don't really think that some of these concepts are really keeping our watershed water in White Lake zone. We're kind of like basically saying, hey, we're going to trap it. We're going to move it across the road because that's what it currently does in that particular instance. And then again, down in front of me and across from the town of White Lakes municipality, we've got some drainage that comes from in front of Holiday Resort and in front of what used to be Langston's Motel, and that pipes across the lake to the town, and then the town, it's not showing it, but it falls back away from White Lake. And then another area that's not on the map, but is, in the Camp Clearwater, right across from the putt-putt or the mini golf. Again, water is coming away from the lake. And I feel like that we're not really capturing the water that we need to capture to let it percolate back to the lake. I feel like we're allowing it to go away from the lake, if that makes sense. And I know there's a bunch of questions and stuff, so I don't know if you want to respond to any of that or
Amanda, if you will, I'll take the first stab at that because there's a couple of things I want to point out just briefly.
Okay.
First of all, those are all great points. And I think it became pretty evident in this project, and I think Amanda can attest to this, that we started off with the idea of a stormwater master plan. We quickly realized that we just did not have the resources to complete a plan that big under this implementation. So we shifted our focus from a master plan per se into more of a conceptual plan, which is what you see tonight. I think that there's room for a phase 2 in a plan like this that could maybe address more flood mitigation, but in given a specific option, staff recommended, and to some degree there was some board conversation, albeit very little board conversation, but that's I guess in some ways that's the point of bringing a plan before a board like this tonight, is to receive some of this feedback. But staff made the recommendation to the engineers that we had to start somewhere because we currently weren't doing much of anything. There is water that naturally flows, as you've addressed in some of your comments. I would say 2 things about that. Number one, you see the concepts that are more designed to hold that water and treat that water. But on the streetscape, that's more so designed to reduce the load of the impervious surface in that area. If you look at a map, and there is a map contained within the report, I'm not sure that she had a slide of it. The most impervious surface in this town is on White Lake Drive in that business district. Although it naturally does flow towards College Swamp, these are, I think it's College Swamp, but this portion of the plan is designed to more keep it away from the lake instead of pushing water back the other way. Now on the 53 side that you mentioned, that's a phase 2. We looked at that originally. The land is so flat there, it's going to basically take some sort of mechanical permit through a pumping system or some sort of engineered system that is designed to pull water. And in the resources that we had, it just wasn't applicable for this plan. So I guess all that is to say, we narrowed our focus down again to try and do things like hide stormwater in plain sight. That would give economic impact to leverage the business community in their push for shoulder seasons. That was a big goal. And also we wanted to mitigate the impervious surface where we could. And the idea, I think, is to come back and continue working on this because it's gone from a master plan into a stormwater plan that accomplishes the thing I said. Amanda, feel free to jump in on that as you see fit.
Yeah, and I will add, as far as the study area, I think I have it here. So, what was, and I think Sean mentioned at some point there was some decision, and I wasn't involved at that point. But as far as what the Golden Leaf grant had included, it had included this map, and this is something that they had and as part of the application, is that the blue polygon that you see there is the project area. So obviously we have been able to kind of extend that with Golden Leaf to kind of focus on some of the commercial area too. But as far as like defining the area, as Sean mentioned, it was, it's for the town. I think the benefit is that, I think with a lot of that being on White Lake Drive, you can kind of see benefits for everybody who kind of is traveling within the town limits. Not to say that there aren't other issues that need to be addressed in a future phase. So one, there was at the very beginning, even with the grant application, a pretty narrowed in project area as far as where kind of the focus was. And again, not to say that there wasn't other issues, other places as well. And it could have just been that maybe at that point, and again, this is just me speculating, maybe there wasn't as much documentation to then justify that as well. Because with, grant applications, you have the photos and other things like that to help document the request. So yes, I would say that was just kind of an addition to that. It was pretty narrowed in early on. And I think too, even with anything that we're storing, as Sean mentioned, as far as the streetscape, it really is trying to treat that kind of impervious area. And I'll kind of again circle back to this. Even though with some of these, you still kind of see that concrete on the side, like there is a lot of soil and media and anything where you have kind of these green infrastructures. There's usually some type of drain underneath just so that way you can kind of get water piping. But the intent is that as much as we can, try to let it infiltrate back into the ground. And I think that's kind of part of the reason we try to incorporate more of these kind of like stormwater control measures, this kind of green infrastructure versus just saying, hey, we're just going to do curb and gutter and suddenly capture everything that's on the street so the street doesn't flood, get it in a pipe and then pipe it someplace. I think that was part of the decision to really focus on these kind of wetlands, these infiltration type basins, was to try to get it the opportunity before it even goes back into a pipe to get back into the ground in a way that is kind of trying to contain it a little bit more, and then also providing it specific media that kind of helps with that treatment. Because even if, let's say there's somebody's yard and, you're like, oh, it's great, it's going over their yard, it's maybe infiltrating back in. One in areas where it's a little bit flatter, or maybe you have a higher groundwater table, you don't necessarily get a high infiltration, but if it's maybe wasn't a yard, but it's a dirt driveway that someone drives on all the time and it's pretty compact, some of that starts to act like impervious surface. So it's become so compact, it's not really allowing the water to infiltrate, as well as, this nice prairie somewhere where you have this open space and the soil has all the little pores to allow the water in. And so even with that, trying to realize that we're just trying to kind of, even with anything that we're allowing back in the water, give it that kind of extra oomph, get that nice media in there, getting those nice pores, kind of giving that the best opportunity to infiltrate back in. So I don't know if you answered all your questions, but hopefully I touched on most of it.
Some of my other things that I'd written down about I know that on the concepts and the pricing had some utility, I think it was like 5% for utility costs and stuff like that. Again, I'm going off of what I know, looking at, property that I'm involved with the big cross the strait of Holiday Resort, and then down the road across from the Resort Collections gift shop and Beach Resort Mobile Home Park. For both of those parks, we actually have underground utilities. And they're buried power lines for the aesthetically pleasing, to not have just like at the town hall, everything's underground. And I feel like that utility cost of 5% is kind of low, just for our two areas. And then we also have cable lines that just got ran through, phone lines and stuff like that are adjacent to White Lake Drive. So I feel like the 5% is just a little bit low. And I know that there is a 35%, cost built into some of the concept pricing plans as, hey, you know, we're reserving 35% for the what ifs, you know. But again, I want to be practical with the utilities and say that utilities, I think, is honestly low, and should be maybe adjust a little bit there. Outside of that, one of the other concerns that I have is for these greenways and greenscapes. You know, the one that's on the screen right now for Indianapolis Cultural Trail bioswales, you know, I kind of like that, but if we're adjacent to White Lake Drive, what I've seen so far, we've got some areas that again, on White Lake Drive, when you're coming in, from Highway 53, the rain event that we had a couple of days ago, the pine needles get caught up in our drains, and they block our drains from draining. And so we get a lot of backup from that. And so the other thing that I would be worried about with like these, not necessarily the swell, but how, like, I don't understand what these plans, I can't read it on the screen right now, but basically our little green blobs, it's like, how are we gonna get the water into where it needs to go? The other thing that I'm thinking out is just White Lake Drive. I pick up a lot of cigarette butts all summer long. And, you know, how is that gonna be a thing of, you know, like trash and road trash that gets diverted into these waterways? The pine needles, the pine cones, you know, what kind of things are maintenance basically is what I'm boiling down to say, you know, what kind of ongoing maintenance costs due to those things can we expect that I don't think was part of the plan, which is always a consideration for the town. So I don't know if you want to speak on that first.
Yeah, I mean, I think even as far as, you know, the example here, like this is one type of street side green infrastructure that you could have. I know sometimes too, that they have, you could basically have different trees where you kind of have the tree and, basically if you were seeing like a tree in a parking lot, how they have kind of like, oh, it's underneath and it has its little grate, but there's different things where you can kind of have like a traditional sort of like opening where the stormwater would go and then it goes underneath the tree and the media. And there's things that could be maybe less linear where it is a little bit more contained. And I think like you mentioned, like maintenance is an option. And I think it's good. The cost is going to vary based on the type of structure that goes in there. And with that, I mean, some of them could be, even if you're thinking of existing infrastructure, like the fact that you have a lot of pine needles in front of a grate, it's just something that it's not costly for someone to go out. If you have someone designated, it's not like you need special equipment or anything like that. But it's just something that it's hard to kind of select exactly what the long-term maintenance costs would be without having selected a very specific type of green infrastructure. And at this planning level, it's really difficult to do because even with the streetscape, like again, that's a plan. Whereas like really where you kind of get into that is when someone does a full design and you have someone who's like a roadway engineer and you have survey of the entire street and you're looking exactly at the grades and they're adjusting the roadway cross section and elevations. You know, even if you're tying into existing driveways, you know, they can adjust those grades, you know, and how it goes a little bit based on different speeds and the different angles. And there's a lot of things that to get water into a certain area you can. And with this, really the hope is that we would kind of take that existing system. I think in these examples here, some of those like orange pipes that the survey heard picked up here is where the existing system is. And we looked at the existing roadway grade. So for example, in this, which actually, if you can see my mouse, like all of these little areas here. So these areas portions where the streetscape had kind of potentially identified an opportunity. And again, that didn't necessarily mean it had to be a stormwater measure. It could have been something else. I think it was just showed that there was some that flexibility in the plan there. But with the kind of existing elevations along the street here, it was already had a slight grade towards this existing network. And so that naturally kind of allows it to be a little bit easier that you're already getting water kind of flowing in this direction. Typically, when you have like a street design, that center line of that street is kind of like that high elevation, even if they're only varying slightly, you kind of get like a triangle shaped cross section where that center line is the highest and it then goes lower as you kind of approach that curb to that outside. So that naturally has water flowing one towards the outside of the street. And then if you can get a little bit of the grade, you can kind of get it right. That's how you get that water running along the curb line. So I think there's a lot of things here, but again, it's really difficult because even with figuring out what exactly is the best option at each space, it's hard to know without someone, we have this nice streetscape plan, but again, that is also at a very high planning level. And without really having gone through the design, it's hard to say, oh yes, at this location, we can exactly get this little piece in here. And this is going to be the perfect fit. So hopefully with this, what we're really trying to show is that there are options along this, and that especially in this particular section of town, if things with the streetscape plan move forward, that, if you're looking at opportunity areas, and again, there were opportunity areas and you're moving forward with design, these are areas where we flagged that these are the most likely going to be the best ones that could convert. And I think even with utility costs, some areas might be better than others. And I think that, with that, usually the most difficult utility conflict is like a sanitary sewer line. That is the one that, like, when we're doing design is usually the most difficult to try to get around with, because it's very driven by the elevations of the pipe there. Whereas like water lines and things like that, like, yes, it costs money and things like that, but it's not as much of a design limitation or a design issue to kind of get around like a water line. And so it's a little bit hard to just say exactly what the maintenance cost is. And I think too, if there was something that had major utility conflicts, then maybe that isn't the best spot to put one of these. I think that's why I think overall, I can't remember off the top of my head, but you can see all the different little green polygons, and those are potential green infrastructure areas. And, obviously these calcs are assuming that we have all of these with all these little drainage areas going there. But if something isn't a good fit just based on the location, based on what they find underground, based on what happens with the streetscape design, it doesn't mean it has to go there. It's just outlining that, when the town gets to that point, these ones, just from that preliminary analysis, seem to be the best locations that this would be a good fit. And so it might be worth exploring more.
Okay. On the, just to point out, we're talking about the opportunities and stuff, but again, what I'm thinking of is like our current situation that we have today and problems that we need to solve. Another two areas that have problems is in front of Town Hall Street and White Lake Drive. It's a low area. There's a drain that's just up from it, but it doesn't drain to it. There's always water at the bottom of Town Hall Street and White Lake Drive because the roadway, I don't know if you can see me, but basically curves around and it's at an angle. So Isley's has water constantly in front of their area, pulling in, pulling out. And then what used to be Brisson's now, the Shoreliner, always has water in front of theirs. And again, that's a problem area that, again, on the plan, there's no real mitigation for that. To say, where do we take our stormwater that's already just sitting there in pools of water that sit there for weeks? Like that's part of what I feel like that the plan's missing a little bit on White Lake Drive. That it's not really solving a problem, I guess, is what I'm saying. But I do like the concept of the streetscape, and if this is something that we can do, working with private, public, because I feel like some of this stuff, honestly, in front of Holiday Resort, this is something that I've wanted to do. I've already bought cypress trees. I'm going to be redoing some stuff myself just to make a little area of, not really a wetland area, but just to have a drain area. So I'm all for it, you know, my personal property, but, go ahead, Sean, got a question?
Amanda, I was gonna just, on that one comment, I just wanted to say that, first of all, these two plans do work in conjunction with each other. The other one being, of course, a streetscape plan that was done, I think it was in March or May, last year. But to the specific question you just asked about water pooling on White Lake Drive, that's really more addressing the curb and gutter. That's part of that streetscape plan that builds upon and sort of begins some stormwater infrastructure in and of itself. So that would be my answer to that question. And a big reason why you don't see it here is because there's really no reason to be redundant with it. We wanted to tie the two plans together so you can see some stormwater control measures that do that. But ultimately, the curb and gutter, I think, would address your question of how we address areas that are low that connect to White Lake Drive, like the Shoreliner and like Town Hall Street when it's coming down to it. So I just wanted to point that out.
All right. And then the last thing, whether you answered or Ms. Hollingsworth, if we've got I'm not really aware of a stormwater problem on the northeast side of the lake. If we're
Well,
going
again,
to-
the northeast side of the lake is not as much stormwater as it is to recharge. We're capturing stormwater there and utilizing stormwater to the benefit of the lake in that area. And I
okay,
know that can be a little bit confusing because this is a flood mitigation plan
right.
at its core, but it's a hybrid plan. That's how we wrote our grant application so that we could utilize stormwater that was already coming down and potentially treat stormwater while also mitigating flood water.
Okay,
as
so
much as possible.
that goes to my question. My question would be, if we're gonna have a sports complex kind of area, number one, where would it be? Number two, if it's already covered in trees right now, how is that not already its own buffer for the trees soaking up water and respirating it out and not having to you know what I mean? Like,
So this is all conceptual.
okay,
I think that's also important to point out. I don't think that we're interested in taking out natural stormwater, because to that point, it does sort of defeat the purpose.
right.
But this is sort of geared to get the thought process moving in that direction. I think a better fit for a place like the recreation park would be an already cleared parcel. I don't know where that is per se. There's not one that we're considering per se, but this plan is meant to be a plan that gives the town opportunity and, quite frankly, opens some door to funding when those opportunities come up. Because again, it's important to point out, as we pointed out multiple times throughout this entire process, there really are no plans. And you can't have a successful project without a pretty comprehensive plan. So that portion again is to illustrate the potential, the possibility of recapturing stormwater, recharging sufficient aquifer water, and naturally treating some of that water, and serving as in the hybrid role. We also see flood mitigation control measures.
Okay. So if it's not a plan, is it just a study? I mean, like, do we need to rename it to be like it was a stormwater study? You know what I mean? Like, because if you see what I'm saying, like,
I'm not sure what you're asking me exactly. I have some idea, but it most certainly is a plan.
okay,
It's more than a study.
all right, all right. Let me see if I got anything else, but I think we're good. But my biggest thing was the water that's coming away from the White Lake fall line side and being diverted away from it. There's any way that we could capture it, sequester it, and let it seep back into the lake. That would be my wants and wishes for the future for White Lake, to make sure that any water, surface water that would have naturally gone to White Lake isn't diverted away, and that we keep it for the highest and best use of White Lake's water quality stuff, I guess, or water table. You know, but that's it. I don't have anything else. So thank you again, Ms. Amanda. I appreciate your patience.
Yeah, thank you for your questions.
All right, well, thank you, Amanda. I think it's certainly very beneficial, your time here spent tonight. And I think the planning board, I can certainly speak for myself as has received an education as to what we're trying to do here. And I think in some ways, this is similar to our comprehensive land use plan that we just finished in the way that is not really a study. It is a plan. It's not necessarily a plan for tomorrow, but a plan for the future. So I wanted to make that point too. But again, thank you for your time tonight. And I certainly look forward to working with you next month to present this to the Board of Commissioners.
Great. Thank you guys. And if you have any other questions, Sean, I'm going to say they can reach out to you and you can reach out to me if there was anything lingering, if that sounds good.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening.
John, you want to go ahead and mention this
Sure.
item 4?
Okay. I want to make sure we're not having any issues back there. So in the interest of time, I'm going to be very brief. There's a couple of things that I want to mention on agenda item. I believe it is number 4. This is a stormwater ordinance example. Another one, this one is specifically for Lake Waccamaw. Right in our backyard, you start to see what some of our neighboring communities are doing. We looked at Nabassa, we looked at Jacksonville, we looked at Brunswick County as a whole. Those communities are a little different than ours. They have PPDES permits they have to follow. They have WACCAMAW guidelines they have to follow. They do some things, as Amanda pointed out in her presentation, that are beneficial to us, but things that we don't necessarily have either the regulations that we have to follow or the requirements that we have to meet on those. So wanted to start there. That's where we started, I believe it was in November. Briefly, I just want to say that, first of all, we did receive a grant from the North Carolina League of Municipalities to write our stormwater ordinance. So we're going to be doing that, proceeding forward with that, and actually bringing a draft ordinance to the board in the future. We're still in the very beginning stages of ironing out what that grant looks like and what our ordinance writing procedure is going to be. So I don't have a timeline yet, but I will update the board with that timeline moving forward. So in that context, in that idea, I wanted to briefly point out a couple of things on Lake Waccamaw stormwater ordinance. And I want to call your attention to their goals and purposes. I apologize, I believe the pages were cut off in the copying process. We are working on digital agendas, so that will help with things like this. But the pages are cut off and considered an item being forward, but I just wanted to apologize for that in advance because I'm going to flip through it quickly. But under the goals and purposes, I think that those are very well articulated goals for the town of Lake Waccamaw. I would caution you to exclude septic systems when you read through this or when you glance at this. We do not have septic systems that are coming into play. They tie septic systems into their stormwater language. But the goals stated there before us, I mean, the definitions are what they are. They're pretty standardized. And if you come over into the scope, excuse me, the page after the scope, it's the mandatory standards for existing developments. I'd really ask you to read through these because again, I think they're articulated well. Our struggle, in my opinion, from the staff level communicating with the board and the public is how we develop a plan that addresses existing development. There's a lot of existing development in the town of White Lake. Of course, there's going to be opportunity for new development in the future. There's also going to be opportunity for redevelopment, but there's a lot of existing development. If you recall, the stormwater ordinance that was produced of stormwater 206J planning grant, I may have those numbers backwards, but it was something that was brought to the town by the Lumber Council of Governments. That was pretty restrictive, and I think the board agreed from the standpoint that it was almost unrealistic to adopt a plan like that because of regulation concerns, because of buying concerns, because of implementation concerns. So you'll see that on their mandatory standards for existing developments, items C, D, and E all address septic systems. So strike them out. They're not in the purview of what we're trying to do here. But I want to call your attention to those because I think that we could certainly use some of that same language in writing our ordinance for what the existing developments could be or should be. And I do also want to move forward to the mandatory standards for new developments. I don't want you to get caught up on the percentages. I know that's an issue in the past, and rightfully so. The lots at White Lake sometimes are very confining. There's not a lot of room to do and develop on some lots around the town. We have to accommodate that in our stormwater ordinance. It's not fair to say somebody can develop 25% of their lot when their lot is restricting to begin with. So we want to put, again, things into practice and recommend things from both the staff level, a board level, or an implementation level that have a high rate of success and a high rate of public buy-in. It is to some degree a domino effect. When you start to have the public see benefits of things like a stormwater, any other type of policy that comes forward in lake management, I would consider that a small victory. You see small victories, and then an accumulation of small victories becomes a big victory. And with this plan, the implementation and the ability for the public to buy in and produce that small victory is something I would really encourage you to keep in the back of your minds when you ultimately go through the draft process and then the recognition process to the board. The last thing I'll say about this is there is a lot of standardized language on mandatory standards for construction activities. That's section 2836. There's some standardized language, back just briefly on the 2835 mandatory standards for new developments. A lot of this is driven at the state level, because if you, of course, as we have talked about in the past, if you are disturbing an acre of land, there's going to be mandatory state requirements come into play, regardless of what the town of White Lake policy says. Generally speaking, the town can add to a state policy, but we certainly cannot undermine a state policy. So you'll see some things in there that may stick out to you. Just understand a lot of that is standardized language. And then finally, under the inspections and notifications on section 2838, I would just say that the way they've written this is the way essentially they have a stormwater team. They're working toward a stormwater design overall. So it's similar to what we're doing on our stormwater plan. Theirs is more technical. They're a little farther along the process. My recommendation to the board would be to include the stormwater as part of the zoning application process. So that and we write it that way. So when you're pulling a zoning application, if there's something that covers your redevelopment, that covers your new development, and if there's anything that would require stormwater permit or stormwater or come under the purview of the stormwater policy, it would be addressed in that process. We also could utilize our zoning inspector, Lee Kane, to kind of fill that inspection role with the stormwater. So that would be my recommendation. Having said that, if the board has any questions on this, I'd be more than happy to take them. I understand this is a lot. And if the board wants to review this and we can come back to it as part of the stormwater draft policy process, I'm also prepared to do that as well.
My biggest comment on on this, of course, is like you said before, imitation is the biggest form of flattery, right? And definitely for Lake WACCAMAW, they copied from Brunswick County or something like that, I guess, because again, and because we talked about it in the last COG thing that they did about the vinyl and plastics of not being incorporated into the landscaping and stuff, and we racked our brains over like, what does that mean? What does that mean? But basically it meant like they don't want vinyls and plastics in the ocean, you know, and like Lake WACCAMAW is not even part of an ocean, it's part of their plan because they copied and pasted it into their thing. So my biggest comment would be, you know, yes, imitate, but we need to make sure that this is dialed in specific for White Lake, because I mean, it's kind of embarrassing to have it in there. And then there's some other stuff that talk about the coastal, whatever, you know, coastal agency, it specifically says, and then it's like Lake WACCAMAW, there's no coastal Lake WACCAMAW, you know, like that would be prudent to their inspection process. Or
There is the WACCAMAW River that flows to the ocean. They do fall under a couple of guidelines that would be coastal agency related because of that.
Okay.
And on the plastic and vinyl piece, I hear it, and I agree. I think that it's in there from their standpoint, from my understanding, because they don't want that like WACCAMAW either. Same way you would want that with the ocean. Whether or not we implement definitions that specific, certainly a conversation, and probably a good idea not to be that specific. The idea is you're trying to limit impervious surface, not impervious surface, impervious trash type material,
Mhm.
things that are not gonna biodegrade.
Mhm.
Like, you want to do that. So that would be.
For sure. But like I said, just make sure it's specific to White Lake.
Alright.
Some other things that were in there about,
And to Amanda's comment too, I didn't mean to cut you
Go
off,
ahead.
I just simply wanted to say. It's evident that it's not a one size fits all.
Right.
It's bits and pieces out of this and that, and that's why I specifically chosen what I have to present to the board of examples. It's certainly not a comprehensive list of what we intend to put in there. It's just examples of what you may see, what you probably will see in some cases, but that's not a complete list. We'll work from other documents and we'll work from ideas.
Yeah.
At the finished product.
and my biggest thing is like, there's a lot of information to go through. And of course, me, like I'm gonna read through all of it and be like, whatever, you know me. But just to say, again, it's from the perspective of the care of wanting to make sure that we're doing what we need to do for kind of White Lake's highest and best use. And so it seems like I get nitty gritty about certain things and stuff, but I'm coming from it from a good perspective to say, I want what's best for our area, I want what's best for our water quality, I want what's best for our business developers, for the code enforcement, like that's a problem in that, if we're hiring, like we just don't have the, like, who do we hire? Who's going to take over? So those would be questions that we'll be asking for in the futures and stuff. But definitely, I think that we need to have kind of like maybe in the process that we do it is to kind of work on the certain things and kind of loop back through instead of having like a final product, what the COG's doing. I don't know. Like I'd rather be more involved in what the COG's doing than just, hey, here's what we came up with. How do you like it? And we're like, oh, I got it all. You know what I mean? Like,
It's the League of Municipalities, but.
Yeah, oh, okay.
Yeah. We can certainly discuss.
and then the last comment was about the definitions. So again, for our planning and zoning, which we've got a buku pages of definitions and stuff.
We made a problem.
Yes, but the point is to make sure that we're not creating a unique definition, because again, for the development that they've got as low development, high development, we've already got those definitions for ourselves, and we need to make sure that any developer that's coming in doesn't say like, oh, well, I'm a low developer here, but I'm a high developer here, and then be a mismatch and stuff. So again, just to make sure that everything matches is.
Plans to work there, so we'll double check that. That's kind of why I skipped the definition, so really not relevant to the conversation.
I did have a comment.
Sure.
Has the Turtle Cove area been addressed with flooding? Or have you already, I didn't hear that mentioned tonight.
Right, the Turtle Cove area is another one that is very low lying area.
Right.
That is best that I understand, gonna take significant effort from things that would be potentially very expensive to study. In other words, pumps. We're gonna have to use pumps there in 53 from my understanding. Now, there may be no solution, but that's probably included in phase 2. But certainly it's on our radar.
This is something very simple, but just a suggestion I think could be done in there. The ditches have not been cleaned out in years. And I think if we did clean out the ditches, we'd see a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'll make a note of that because we can look into that and potentially that, and I agree that it can be that simple. Can be a fix. Thank you.
No. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you for your time.
Any other business that the planning board members?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So from tonight, what will be?
Make sure you
So from tonight's meeting, what will the board receive?
You've heard.
Those concept plans, y'all were telling the board, y'all are in favor of all of that?
We don't have to tell them we're in favor of it. It's going to them.
Unless y'all question it.
Well,
So ultimately, the you as the commissioner, whether we approve something or disapprove it, we could make a recommendation, but it doesn't matter what we say, whether we give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It's ultimately up to the board of commissioners for the town of White Lake to make an
That's the
ultimate
board of
decision.
Commissioners, they say if the planning board sends it, we accept it. And y'all
not necessarily, they don't. No, we've done that. before and.
I'm not sure I understand your question. Are you voicing your concern or?
Yeah, yeah, I feel like they heard all this and then next month you will hear that the planning board
And we'll be,
recommends this.
no, you won't hear a recommendation.
We have not asked for a recommendation.
No, that's what I was
Yeah,
asking.
yeah, we,
What your action from today will be presented to the board.
no, we won't have any action on that. That was just a presentation to us and we'll be at the meeting as well.
Yeah, so there's two things.
Yeah.
We said we would ask the board for their input. We didn't ask for a recommendation from the board on this.
Okay.
And number two, we did invite them to the board of commissioners meeting
What
for
we
that
will too.
presentation and to voice the input to the board then.
Okay.
But yeah, we're not voting on anything as far as.
Okay, that's what I was trying to
Yeah.
figure out. How would we go, how today's meeting would show up.
Cause this was basically an overview. Am I correct?
You are
Okay.
And will we get the same thing next month?
more or less at the board level. Yeah. It'll be a little more detailed presentation. I'm assuming there'll be some more questions and answers. But the plan itself is pretty much written. Again, this is not a comprehensive plan. A to Z, it's more like A to F or A to whatever, but think of something with alphabet, but, I'm certainly happy to talk with you outside of the meeting if there is some concern or more than welcome to address it at the board commissioners level. And we can work through it, but
Like Scott said, I think that there are areas on the lake that drown more easily than White Lake Drive in the business area.
But I would say that's really not up for debate in this plan. The plan has to follow grant application.
It's got
And
to be a
and that
focus.
portion is done. Now, a future plan, I think that's phenomenal. But under the grant program, the way the grant application is written, we have to work with the scope of that.
And the scope of that was to do a streetscape or,
Streetscape is a completely different project. We want
No,
to tie
I
it
mean,
in.
the concept two, is that what it was, Jonathan, with the monkey grass on the side of the road?
That was a storm control measure that's tied into the streetscape plan. The streetscape plan is a completely separate document.
So, I'm still not sure, but the. Okay, all right. I give up.
To me, just my opinion, listening to all of this.
Yes.
This is a start to what to me looks like a long process. So an area was picked, let's work on this area because we've got the streetscape plan already completed. Let's see how we can tie these two together. And basically utilize the money in the best possible way. Is it gonna cover around the whole lake? No, it's not. Is it gonna cover every flooded area? No. Those are gonna be different phases that we'll have to do more grant writing and planning for. But I see this as just we've got to start somewhere. Let's start right here because we've already got one piece we can tie it to. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So the
And then-
streetscape 6 million, and she said this would be another.
It's not cheap.
Yeah.
There's really nothing cheap about flood control or improvements across the town.
Especially
Consider that,
after the
guys, we're
fact.
talking about one little piece that's going to be $7 million. Think about it. Do you want to drop back in front and look at the areas that are flooding and try to figure a way to fix those?
I think those will be multi-millions more than even what we're looking at now.
And it should be mentioned too, this is not town money that's being spent on this project. We are aggressively pursuing grant funds for this. We're not asking the board to commit $7 million of any budget for any of this. So, I mean, you can theoretically do both.
I just feel like it's just a start. That's what I came across with.
Yeah.
It's a start to try to see how we can
Thank you.
Well, I think that's a good point about the, again, to have the plan, in order to get grants, we have to have the plan. And so I think that's the better definition for it, to say, hey, we've got a plan. So that way we can apply for the grants to get the things done that we need to, because again, part of the prerequisite for a lot of the grants is what's your plan, you know,
Yeah.
and so it's kind of like chicken and the egg of like, okay, well, we need to get money in order to do whatever, so we can do this, do that, and it's, you know, again, like you said, it's this long process of going through to go to these little steps that we've got to jump through. One of the other things I want to pull up for other business, to again, for us to revisit in the future, however we need to do it, is concerning the multi-use path, and development around White Lake. When we passed the 160D transfer of, you know, new regulations and stuff like that, we talked about the requirement of new development to have a sidewalk on the property, and we took that out. So I think we might need to revisit, because we specifically said sidewalk. And again, I hate having developments, you know, you go through Raleigh and Durham and stuff, and they've got like their development, and then they've got a sidewalk, and it's a sidewalk to nowhere, you know?
Yeah.
But again, it's the form of, hey, I do it here, I do it here, I do it here, I do it here, and then finally all the dots fall into place, and then it's a connected thing. So I would like to put forth, not today, but to say that we need to work on maybe pulling that back into our planning and zoning rules, to say any new development, we need to consider a plan or something to say dedicated area for a sidewalk or a bike path or something to be towards that experience of visitors coming to our area, if that makes any sense. Not jumble, but I'll just say I like to work towards that.
The board approved me to set up a task force to start working, on the multi-use path. And yeah, without your knowledge, want to join me. I asked to have staff, elected officials, planning board, and then citizens at home. Because I feel like if everybody knows what's going on, everybody will be more understanding and we work together. You may know something that I don't know about part of it. You may have a source for money that I don't know of. So if any of you would be willing to work with me on that. Julie filled the office up over there and I started looking through things. I brought out 4 boxes of it. But it's got to start somewhere for me. I know y'all been working on it, but so let me know.
If you are interested, I'm more than happy to share those documents with you as well. Actually reference the next slide.
Thank you.
Thanks, dear. All right, anything else? For the good of the board.
I recommend that we adjourn.
We have a motion. We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.